Namaste and welcome once more. We are here today to talk about one more aspect of self-improvement. As I have been mentioning again and again, unless we try to improve ourselves, we can never become better. Depending on others for improving ourselves is not the only way in which we can go forward. We need to depend on ourselves. And that is what self-improvement is all about. In the earlier two parts, we came across two important ideas of self-improvement: creative thinking and critical thinking. Today, we are going to talk about lateral thinking. Lateral thinking is very similar to creative thinking. There are many overlaps here, but creative thinking can be about every aspect of our life, whereas lateral thinking is mainly used when there is some issue to solve, some problem to overcome. Now, the term lateral thinking was used in 1967 by the famous writer, psychologist, Edward de Bono. And after that, it has become very popular. But this doesn't mean that people were not using this concept. The terminology might be new, but the concept is not new. It has always existed. What exactly lateral thinking is, we can understand by calling it as horizontal thinking. About a problem, you don't think only from that one point or think hierarchically, but think in different ways. The same issue, but from different perspectives. And creatively, uniquely, you find a solution. That is what lateral thinking is all about. Now, we can talk about the first example, and that is the creative way to solve a problem. Suppose we define lateral thinking as a creative way to solve a problem. I can repeat an example of Sri Ramakrishna, which I might have given earlier also. And that is the manner in which he handled a very tricky situation. Usually, in religious matters, in the matters of worship, etc., people are very inflexible. They only follow a rigid single method. Now, that is not the only way in which we can handle things. Once it so happened that in the Dakshineshwar Kali temple, just next to the temple, there is the temple of Radhakanta. That is the Krishna's temple. And in this temple, the idol, that is the image of Sri Krishna, somehow it fell from the hand of the person who was worshipping. And what happened is that the leg got broken. Now, the usual religious injunction is that if your idol is become defective, you cannot worship it. It has to be thrown away. So this is the usual form of thinking. That is the rational thinking, the thinking which is traditional way. But Rani Rashmani, who was the creatrix of this temple, she did not want this because the idol had been worshipped for a long time. She had an attachment. Others also had an attachment to this. They didn't want to throw it away because for them, it manifested the real God. It manifested the prana shakti of the divine. So she didn't want it to be thrown away. Then Sri Ramakrishna was asked, what shall we do with this problem? Now see, creative problem solving, not the traditional or the accepted norm, but something different. Ramakrishna was very good at lateral thinking. And then what did he do? He gave an example. He said, suppose your son-in-law, the favorite son-in-law who used to look after the temple was Mathur Babu. Suppose your son-in-law broke his leg. Would you throw your son-in-law into the Ganga? That was the advice given by the traditionalists. Throw this image into the Ganga and bring a new idol for worshipping. So Sri Ramakrishna said, would you, if such a thing happened to your son-in-law, throw the son-in-law into the Ganga? No, you would not. You would go to the doctor and get his leg attended to. Till it healed, till it was mended. So he took the responsibility of mending the leg. Even today, you can see the idol and you cannot make out that it is a mended leg. This is a very excellent example of lateral thinking. Not what is accepted, not what is usual, what everybody says, or what is expected that you should say, but a different way of looking at things. You must remember, I have mentioned this many times, that today, since machines are doing so much, you have artificial intelligence and you have machine learning. Therefore, human brain in its repetitive activities is becoming obsolete. We don't need those things, those activities which are only repetitive, which machines can do fine. Therefore, human beings need to think out of the box. You will find many, many examples, many puzzles if you search online for lateral thinking. But we need not only go according to that. We can go to our own scriptures. For instance, you can always think of the questions which were asked to Yudhishthira by Yaksha in the Mahabharata. Each of the answers is an excellent example of lateral thinking. King Yudhishthira was now in exile, and Yaksha said that you will get your brothers' lives if you are able to answer all my questions. One by one, he asked the questions. And Yudhishthira does not reply in the hidebound way. He does not reply in the expected manner in which these questions would be asked. Each of them is an example of lateral thinking, not of the horizontal, not of the vertical or traditional methods of thinking. For instance, the first question, I've used only 4 questions. You can look at all the questions and you can analyze each one of them. I'm just taking up 4 of them, and I'm telling you how we can learn lateral thinking by reading this episode of the Mahabharata. What is faster than the wind? Now, this is one question which is asked. What is faster than the wind? Now, what would we think? We would think about human beings. We would say Milkha Singh, or we would think of the running race champions all over the world. Or we would think of the animal world, because animals can move around, plants cannot move, inanimate objects cannot move. So whatever is moving, what moves faster than the wind? We are looking at moving objects now. So we can look at the rabbit, or we can look at the hare. All these things we would start looking at. They're very fast runners. But that is the traditional way of thinking. That is the usual way of answering the question. Yaksha did not want that. Yaksha wanted something more, a real intelligent answer. Yudhishthira's answer is an example of lateral thinking. What is faster than the wind? He says, the mind is faster than the wind. Now you can experience this. Your mind races. If you sit quietly for 1 minute, you will find there are a few hundred or thousand thoughts running across your mind. So the mind is constantly racing, much faster than the wind. You can measure the wind, the speed of the wind. It is difficult to measure the speed of the mind, because when the mind is active, it is really going fast. This is the mind we have. We are wasting our mental energies in doing senseless things. Instead, if we devote it to self-analysis, if we devote it to self-improvement, and we think laterally, or we think creatively or critically, then we are giving the mind a right orientation. The next question is, what is more numerous than grass? You see an old building not being used for long, you find shoots of grass coming out of it. You see on the fields and forests, you find that grass is more numerous. Trees and plants you can count, but grass you really cannot count. Then again, Yudhishthira does not try to look at numbers. Instead, he delves inside. You know, I told you Edward de Bono was a psychologist. So Yudhishthira is using psychology. Imagine, this is not a text which is of the 19th, 20th century. It is a text which is very, very old. And what is the answer Yudhishthira gives? He says, thoughts. What is more numerous than grass? And he gives the answer as thoughts. It is a creative answer. It is a unique new answer. It is not an answer which is usually given. So here again, he's able to satisfy the yaksha who wanted the answers which are very good. Now, next question is, what is the most valuable possession? Yaksha asks, what is the most valuable possession? Now, people might say money, they might say power, they might say, family members or affection, love, etc. Yudhishthira says, knowledge. Because unless we have knowledge, we cannot get anything else. If you want any of the other possessions, you require knowledge. And proper knowledge, right knowledge, these are very important. So we need to keep this in mind when we are talking about lateral thinking. See how each answer, if you analyze, you find a uniqueness, you find the ability to think in a manner which is different from what the average individual would think. Then the last of the questions which I'm talking about, what is charity? Immediate answer will come, charity is helping others, giving money to a poor person, giving food to the hungry, or charity might be something, which we show generosity to a group of people. A lot of, things India gives to other countries. That is all we consider as very good, very nice charity. But Yudhishthira again does not think in that accepted way. He does not think in the narrow manner which we are usually used to thinking. Instead, what does he say? He says, protecting all beings. He's going to be a king. So you can see how, for him, charity is not only looking after his family, because he has power. He should not only look after his own people. He should look after all human beings who are there under his rule. Not only human, he says, all beings, protecting everyone. Even the smallest ant requires protection. We have beautiful sayings in Jainism. I'm sure you can read them up as to how, when we are breathing also, we are taking in germs. So the Jains usually put a mask whenever they are going, whenever they are breathing. Today, all of us are putting a mask out of fear. But look at them. They have been using this mask as a sense of charity. Such examples of lateral thinking you can find in many places. I'm sure as children, you have read stories of Vikram and Betal. At every incident of Vikram and Betal, a question is asked. And unless you can give the right answer, the consequences are terrible. Vikram Vikramaditya manages to give all the answers. And therefore, he's not able to bring back Betal to where he wants him to be. These are stories for children also. And this is the way in which children are trained in lateral thinking. Can you imagine how, by reading these stories, you can come across the idea of lateral thinking? Look at the stories of Sri Krishna's life. You will find examples. Of course, I won't go into all those details. Therefore, what we have to do now is we have to notice two things. One is, what are the qualities which you require or which you want to concentrate on in order to become good at lateral thinking? And what are the strategies you have to practice? Traits which are inherent, which is inbuilt, and what are the processes by which you will become better at this lateral thinking point. Remember that lateral thinking is not only for self-improvement. Very often, when you go for job interviews, etc., you might be asked a question on lateral thinking from your own experience. That is why in every part, at least, I hope I'm mentioning that you have to learn from your own experience. Learn to analyze your own experience. This I told you in the second part itself. Self-analysis is most important. That is a real learning graph. We want to learn anything, we have to look at ourselves. Only then we learn well. Looking around always at others might not benefit us because we are different from those others. So let us see, what are the traits you require? One is, you should have the ability to look at everything with fresh eyes. We are powerfully conditioned. You must remember that life from birth is conditioning us. It is like the software in your computers. It is already programmed. So our programming begins at birth. We have a fresh, clean hard drive, no programs. And then slowly programming. We call this as conditioning. So by the time you're conditioned, you become very rigid. You cannot look around. Earlier they used to use horses for traveling. I'm sure you must have seen or heard about horse carriages. Today they are very rare. Sometimes we can go for a ride. If you go to Kolkata, I saw near Victoria Memorial. If you go to Chennai beach, you can see them. I'm sure Mumbai beach also must be having. Many other cities might have. What do they do to the horses? They put sideways like this. This is called blinkers. Blinker means the horse should not get distracted by looking this side or this side. It should only go straight. So our conditioning usually takes us only straight. But progress is very creative sometimes. You need not always get to the point by going straight. You might get better if you go in a creative manner. This is what lateral thinking teaches us. I'm not saying that we should give up the usual method. Please remember that it doesn't mean that lateral thinking should always be used. It should be used when necessary. It's a skill which you should have. It is like, the various kinds of qualities, the treasures which you have within you. And when you require them, you will be able to make use of them. This is what you have to remember when you are looking at lateral thinking. So don't be blinkered. That is what freshness is saying. Freshness would mean that even an old idea, you look at it from a newer perspective. This is the freshness of your idea. This is the freshness of your approach. I can give you an example from my own life as a teacher. For almost 30 years or 40 years, a teacher might teach the same text. But what is so creative about it? Because every time a new batch of student comes, every year or every semester, a new batch of student comes, the teacher has to re-look at the text from the perspective of this new group of students. It is a fresh look. It is as though this text is being reread once more. This concept is being re-looked at once more. That is why, since I'm an English teacher, I gave you this example. The best of colleges which are doing engineering or other science subjects are now saying humanities is a must. It should be one part of the one paper at least, because that keeps your mind open. It keeps your mind laterally clear. You're able to go everywhere. If you see a crowded road, you will know exactly how lateral thinking works. Of course, on a road, it is a violation of traffic. But if you have a four-wheeler, you can't move on the road. You have to keep standing. You have a two-wheeler, you can keep going like that. Wherever space is there, you can go forward. If you're walking, that's much easier. If you're cycling, that also is quite simple. So you can imagine how freshness is so important. Now, the second trait which you require is whenever you're looking for a solution, look for a new solution. This is very important. Usually the solutions are plenty, like the story I told you about Sri Ramakrishna's experience. The solution is immediate, but the solutions which were given by others were the usual traditional solutions. A new solution was like comparing an idol in a temple to a member of the family. We don't generally look at that. We look at it as a stone image, but we don't look at it with love and affection as we look at a family member. So Sri Ramakrishna is saying, your son-in-law makes it into a personal relationship. You can see how important that is, to have this kind of a personal relationship. Now, we have to remember this, that any problem which comes to us needs a creative solution. Today, as I speak to you, we have a huge problem of the pandemic. Now, the creative solution to this pandemic is not only the vaccine or the mask or social distancing, it is also being careful of how much unnecessary movement you are doing. People are saying that everybody is tired of COVID. They have what is called as COVID fatigue. Not because you have the infection and you recovered and you are feeling tired, but you're tired of the pandemic, which is silly. What is a creative solution? The creative solution is to think that the pandemic is not going to last forever. Now, if I'm careful, in future, I can go around. In future, I can do exactly what I want. Today, if I'm considerate, not only for my own health, but for the health of the entire community, for the health of the entire nation. This is a new way of looking at it. Every time we think that the person in authority, the government or the doctor, should enforce on us. I'm talking to you about self-improvement. I'm not saying what others will do for you. Let us do for ourselves. What can we do? Can we not do this little bit of sacrifice today, a new way of looking at it, so that we are also contributing positively to the benefit, to the eradication of a pandemic? That is a new way of looking at things. And the third one is flexible. I already told you about this. A person who has to cultivate lateral thinking must be open and flexible. Many people refuse to accept anything other than what they think is right. My way is the only way. Your way is not correct. A beautiful example Sri Ramakrishna used to give. He used to say that everyone thinks their watch only is correct. So if I ask you the time, you say it is 10 to 4. Then I say, no, no, it is not 10 to 4, it is quarter to 4. So two of you go and ask a third person, what is the time now? You say, oh, it is 4 o'clock. Now, whose watch is correct? We don't know. So we have standard methods of checking up time. You know, earlier when we were under the British, we had what is called as Greenwich Mean Time. Today we have what is called as Indian Standard Time. If you go to a bigger country, you have time zones and so on. So it is not the watch which is important. What is important is that we need to be able to accept that I might be wrong and the others might be right. What I think is one solution, what another person thinks may be a possible second solution. Otherwise, we become very autocratic. Otherwise, we become dictatorial, and we should not become like that. The next point is that we have to get rid of assumptions. Assumption by saying that whatever the scientists are saying is absolutely right. It's a wrong assumption. There might be some mistakes, not in science, but in the interpretation of science. Similarly, whatever our traditional texts tell us is all wrong. I've given this example many times because I see many people doing this today. But it is not true. There might be certain things which are usable, certain things which are no longer usable. So we have to make a choice. So any assumption is like a false belief. We have to check up our beliefs and then find out. You know, a small child might always think that my parents are always right. Then they go to school and realize that, you know, many things the parents might not know, which the teacher is telling them. They say, my teacher is always right, but the parents are not. Slowly, as we grow up, we realize that every human being is right sometimes and wrong some other times. So assuming something is not a good way of living or cultivating lateral thinking. So these few traits, if you can cultivate, then it would be a wonderful thing for you. You will become good at lateral thinking. The traits are cultivated when we go on practicing them again and again. A trait does not remain with us unless it is practiced regularly. They become rusted otherwise, and whatever skill we had, we lose after some years of disuse. Now, how to go ahead, how to go forward, that we have what is called as lateral thinking. Now, any idea which keeps you within a small boundary is not a good idea. We have to go ahead and think slightly in a bigger way. You know, usually in religion, in scriptures, this kind of a thing happens. So we don't have the ability to laterally think. Numerous examples of this you will find in Sri Ramakrishna. Even in today's world, if you look at all the religions and the practicing people, you will find many lateral thinking strategies. I'm not going into all those details because we don't have that much of time. But I'm sure each one of you, if you combine creative thinking, critical thinking, lateral thinking, every aspect of human experience, you can analyze and bring out the most essential essence of each experience. Don't reject as useless. You know how intelligent the human body is? You take so much food, it doesn't accept everything. It accepts what is useful, it throws away what is not useful. Can the mind not do that? We are getting so much food inside. The food are all our impressions, you know, which we are hearing, seeing, tasting, touching, etc., all those things. They are collecting in our mind. And now we do not know what to throw and what to take. Therefore, we have to become, go out of this ability which limits us, go out of our conditioning, decondition what is stopping us from improvement. Then, of course, encouraging unique insights. If you look at today's advertisements, some of them are really unique. Advertisement is a great field for lateral thinking. If any of you is planning to go into this field, you will need lateral thinking all the time. Advertisement puts it in such a way that your attention is immediately captured. Because if they put it in the usual accepted way, nobody will notice it. That is why if you look at the word ambulance written on an ambulance, you will find that it's a mirror image, because it is written like that in the ulta way, then immediately attention is captured. Otherwise, we read the term ambulance, we are blasé. We don't pay attention. We don't show any importance to it. So lateral thinking is helping us in a way in which we are finding out insights. We are getting insights which are very unique. Unique is such a wonderful thing, that you are thinking differently from what others, the general public, are thinking. You are thinking in a manner which is different. This would be wonderful. And then, of course, how to cultivate them, how to cultivate lateral thinking. If you keep your mind engaged, give your mind the proper exercises, crossword puzzles or Sudoku, number games. Such things are very useful, because I have told you this also earlier, and I'm repeating again, because if we are able to do such things, the mind remains fresh, the mind remains active. The best way, of course, to keep your mind active is to do meditation every day in a disciplined manner. Discipline is something we will talk about possibly in one of the parts, but today I'm just talking about the meditation as a discipline. Remember, I told you while talking about creative visualization that meditation is also like that. Creative visualization is secular meditation. In meditation, we always say that it is a spiritually elevating point, but it is not spiritually elevating alone. It gives you mental discipline, powerful control over the mind. This you will be able to get when you practice it. So always keeping the mind engaged, always keeping the mind positive. Many people are talking about the mental problems, not only the physical health problems, but the mental health problems of 2020 and 2021. Now, who gets a mental health problem? A person who has weak mind. We have to make our mind strong, like we are making our body strong by physical exercises. We have to make the mind strong by mental exercises. Then only we will have a lot of exposure, and then we will be able to see that lateral thinking is really possible. Many examples are given. This example is very often given. I'm sure you know that two mothers go to the king and they say that this child is mine, this child is mine. Now, what does the king do? The king does lateral thinking. And that is, he says, okay, I cannot decide who the child belongs to. I will now cut the child into half and give it to both of you. The real mother says, no, I don't want the child to be cut. You can give it off to the other. Whereas the false mother says, okay, that's fine. Which means that lateral thinking can solve a problem and, bring a proper judgment also. This is a very popular story. Like that, look around you for examples. When you see advertisements today or tomorrow, try to analyze them and see whether lateral thinking is being used, how it is being used. In your life, you might have had some very creative problem-solving examples. You must have done it yourself. You must have seen your family members do it in the most creative manner. Many people love to live with a problem. We will talk about problem solving someday. But it is not the way to live. For real improvement, we need to find solutions. And creative solution, thinking about 4 or 5 different solutions, then accepting one of them, that is lateral thinking. I would like you to do a lot of exercises, mind mapping, etc. are wonderful. Maybe if possible, I can do mind mapping one day, but then for that I need a board. It's very difficult to do mind mapping. If I show you only a PowerPoint, then it'll be so boring on YouTube. Therefore, I think you have a lot of information available on internet, which you can do. But my last word every time is that we need to make up our mind to improve, and all improvement is possible when we look at ourselves, our own experiences, things that are happening around us, what is going on inside the mind. So put these 3 together: creative thinking, critical thinking, lateral thinking. Use them in your everyday life whenever necessary. Don't use them when they are not necessary. And then what you will find is that it is very useful for you. I wish you all the best. Namaste, and till we meet again.